them at the end during that Q&A. And then at the end, we'll just have, for those of you here in office with us, we'll have some networking and some light bites. I think Shannon has ordered us some chicken wings, cheese balls, and I think pizza's coming. So yeah, I'll give you all a few seconds to scan the QR code. I don't know if this mic is working. Is it working? It's okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so I think we can get started then. So before I even talk about OGP and who we are, I think it's important to have some context. So for those of you who are Singaporean or who have been in Singapore for a long time, you may have heard of this term, Smart Nation. So Smart Nation was an initiative that was started in 2014 to transform Singapore through technology. Basically, how can we make Singaporeans' lives better through tech? And this is a great lofty goal, right? A great initiative. But what we found is that actually when we take a hard look at where government is today, right, where government tech is, we realize that actually many of the government's digital products were subpar compared to industry standards. So this is in regards to 3 categories: security, reliability, and usability. So when we talk about security, security of course is key to any government, any digital service, but especially key for government services, because you're asking citizens to trust you with their precious data. So any breach in security, any data loss can be devastating when it comes to trust. But unfortunately, we see that there have been multiple security vulnerabilities and leaks compromising Singaporeans' data over the years. And a lot of these are due to unforced human error or outdated security practices. Then, secondly, reliability. So oftentimes government digital services are often unreliable, whether that's through long scheduled downtimes or unscheduled downtimes when things go wrong. Sometimes government services are not there when you need them to be there. And this is in stark contrast to the private sector, right? When you think about your Google, your WhatsApp, your Snapchat, TikTok, whatever, while these services do go down, they don't go down to the extent that government services do. And then lastly, usability. So I think security, reliability, these are hygiene factors, but usability is really key when those are settled. And usability, when you look at digital services traditionally in the government, oftentimes users are left frustrated with digital services because they cannot find, the button that they need to click on to pay for their CPF, or they can't find, the information that they need to conduct their critical government services. And this makes them very frustrated. So what's stopping us from just fixing this, right? Why can't we just fix this tomorrow? So when we look at how the Singapore government runs, we realize that there's actually a number of barriers limiting us and limiting how much we can fix. So for example, legacy government systems. We're building in a world of legacy systems. Some of these systems may have been built in the early 2010s, 2000s, and they're not compatible with the latest cloud technology. Secondly, regulations. So we have a number of regulations on architecture, HR, procurement, et cetera, and that's stemming our modernization efforts. And then lastly, technical expertise. So oftentimes, as you may know, the government is not traditionally top of mind when it comes to top tech talent. And so the government doesn't have the technical expertise oftentimes, or if they do have the technical expertise, it's brought in too late. And so we see that this is a problem not just in Singapore, but really across the world. So in my own home country of the United States, we have the Obamacare website, which costs $840 million. You see in the UK also a number of different issues. But in contrast, you see that in the private sector, there's so much progress being made through technology. And you may have seen this in your current or previous companies, where, for example, Google is using AI to block spams, or Netflix is using cloud infrastructure. Even Snapchat is using computer vision for those face filters. And a huge part of what makes these companies successful are the modern organizational techniques that they employ. Because these companies are not just thinking about, okay, how can we implement the latest technologies, but they're really thinking about how can we reinvent this organization, all the way from organizational design to values to how do we do hybrid work, how do we communicate. They're really thinking about how do we run the most impactful organization. And as a Singapore government, I think, if Fortune 500 companies can die out by not innovating fast enough, we would be foolish to think that as a Singapore government, we wouldn't be left behind just as rapidly if we didn't innovate. So with this context in mind, with all the problems that persist in the public sector, we thought, what if we were to build an organization that operated like a modern tech company, but working on public sector problems? And that's the basis for our team, Open Government Products, or OGP for short. And so we're an experimental team who builds tech for the public good. And our mission is threefold, which is one, to experiment with these tech practices to really build good tech products that solve public sector problems. The second part is to demonstrate that these practices can work cost effectively and efficiently in the government in our own operations. And then thirdly, it's to propagate the adoption of these practices to the rest of the public service, because our ultimate goal is to make Singapore better, and we want to accelerate the digitalization of the government. And so in the same way that in the private sector, you're really rethinking all these different parts of an organization, we're trying to do the same at OGP, which is that we're trying to think about, okay, what is the best way to approach talent management or organizational design or even public comms? How can we really create the best organization to make the most impact? And so now that you have some sense of, why did we even start OGP in the first place, let me share a little bit about what we actually do. So we have a number of products. These are many, if not most of the products that we work on. I wish I could talk to you all about every single product, but I'll just pick a few that you may have heard of. So first is Parking SG. Parking is a mobile app to replace these cumbersome parking coupons that we used to have in Singapore. It's a way to pay for street parking. And parking is now used by about 90% of the cars in Singapore. And I think we've had over 130 million parking sessions to date. Another product that you may have encountered is the COVID-19 vaccination system. So if you got your COVID vaccine in Singapore, you probably saw this, which is the national appointment system. We developed the system in order to find a way to manage vaccine supply with demand, and also to make sure that we could get every single person in Singapore vaccinated, because you're really trying to get all 5 million people. And we were able to achieve about, I think it's over 96% vaccination rate now with this, which is great. And then there's also Form SG, which is a Google Forms for government. It's a digital form builder that we developed to allow public officers to create forms in minutes. And so you may have seen a form that looks something like this. It probably was a Form SG. And Form SG even goes beyond what you can see, for example, from Google Forms, because as we mentioned earlier, security is so important in the government. We made sure that our form submissions are end-to-end encrypted. And it's been key to the government's agility in handling COVID-19. So if you see before, we had 3 million responses before COVID, and then afterwards it went all the way up to 100 million responses, and I think it's about 150 million and counting. Another product that we developed is Isomer, which is a standard website template builder. So, we talked earlier about usability. Usability is really key, right? So with Isomer, we're really trying to make it impossible, or maybe very, very difficult to make a bad website. And so with Isomer, we can launch informational sites fast. So we've been able to launch sites in as quickly as 1.5 days, which is really important in the government, especially in situations like COVID, when things are changing a lot. So we have usable, impactful digital products. The next question I get asked is, well, how reliable are they? How secure are they? So short answer is very. So we have Go and Form here, so you can see high uptime with no planned downtime. And then if you look at Isomer, that website builder, Isomer has 100 times lower average downtime than non-Isomer sites. And then when it comes to security, all of our products have to go through external cybersecurity assessments with firms such as FireEye, Silent Breach, etc. So every single product has to go through this process. And then next question I get asked is, well, how expensive are they? How fast does it take to build? I think what's key to this question is how our organization is structured. So we're structured in lean, competent product teams. So usually comprising of a product manager and a designer and a few engineers. And this structure really allows us to build fast and build efficiently. So you can see this in the results, right? So parking SG, which is about used by about 90% of the cars in Singapore, this costs just $2,500 a month in infrastructure costs. Isomer, that website builder, similarly, $840 a month in infrastructure costs. And you can see this very starkly when you look at mc.gov.sg, which is a digital medical certificate that you can get from your doctor, show to your employer. On the left is when we used to have it on traditional government infrastructure, the Nectar Apex column. Originally, it cost us $21,000 a month. But when we switched to the commercial cloud, when we switched to AWS, we were able to reduce that to $594 a month, which was about 35 times less. So now that you know a little bit about what we do, I want to spend a few minutes just chatting briefly about, how are we able to build these products? So I think what's crucial to our DNA at OGP is our annual Hack for Public Good, which is a hackathon that we have every January. We take the month to pause non-core work to work on whatever public sector problem interests us. So whether that's scams, or whether that's increasing the Singapore birth rate, or whether that's figuring out how to deal with bureaucracy. So how that works is people break into smaller teams of about 2 to 5 people, and then they go into the community and they really figure out what problems there are on the ground and brainstorm and ideate ways to solve them. So you can see that some of these products, this is from the 2020 Hack for Public Good. You may be familiar with some of these products. So for example, Scam Shield is a product that was developed from this process. It's an app that you can download on your phone to block scam calls and messages. We have Postman, the mass messaging tool that powered the gov.sg WhatsApp during the beginning of COVID. That was a hackathon project. Redeem SG, which is a redemption tracking tool. It powers the CDC voucher campaign, those $100 that you get per household. That was also a hackathon project. That was from people on the ground, OGP staff, who thought, hey, this is a problem. Let me figure out a way to solve it. And you can see this in our 2021 and 2022 projects as well. And then, when we're talking about innovation, right, and really thinking from first principles, one of the areas that's important to us is really how do we make sure that if we're trying to get the top tech talent into the government, how can we ensure that they have a good career, a good experience in the government? And one way that we try to do this is by creating new technical career tracks in the government. And these are validated by industry partners. So by creating these career tracks, we're trying to ensure that performance management is based on demonstrated impact, not just unrealized potential. And so I will leave you with this, which is that we have the best people working on things like building another shopping cart, or trying to get people to stay on your phones and get entertained, which are not bad things, but we don't have these best people working on public good problems. And that's a problem in and of itself. Right, in the public sector, we have so many important problems, whether that's climate change, whether that's poverty, whether that's helping the elderly, and we need talent like you, right? We need your skills, your expertise to make Singapore better. And we're not just actually thinking about Singapore, we're thinking even beyond, because our ultimate goal is to take what we do here, open source our products, and really share that with other organizations and other governments around the world to really address some of these common challenges that we all face. So if this is something that resonates with you, please feel free to join some of our info sessions. So today's the 7th December one, but we have a few sessions next week as well. And you can feel free to join, scan this QR code to apply directly to join us at OGP. So with that, I'll pass it off to QA. Again, you can scan the QR code if any questions, but I'll pass it off to QA to talk about engineering. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm QA, but before I begin, just want to kind of do a quick straw poll, like how many of you guys are here to learn more about engineering at OGP? Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. Right, I'm going to talk about engineering at OGP, but I'll do it in 10 minutes because that's all the time that's been allotted to me. And I'll do it in like 10 different questions. And I think these are 10 questions that people often ask about engineering at OGP, and I thought like useful to just kind of answer them up front. Because the first question is like, who am I? I mentioned that I'm like a QA, right? What do I do at OGP? I'm actually an engineering manager at OGP. I run engineering on the health tech vertical. Under health tech medical, there are a number of products. Some of them are like health appointment systems. So if you book like a pneumococcal vaccine or influenza vaccine, that's likely on book.health.gov.sg. We also build like a medical social worker system to help like medical social workers to kind of manage cases better. That's called Catch360, and we also have a number of like different products that we've built for COVID over time. So this picture here, like unfortunately, is the only picture that I could find of me and the team. I have no idea why, but yeah, this is like, and I have no idea why I'm so big there. But this is just a representation of like the team that we're working on. So currently, we're like a team of around 10 engineers working on 3 different products. Okay, cool. So the second question, which is like I'm very sure it's somewhere on Pigeonhole right now, and like it's top voted, is what is it really like working in the government as an engineer, right? We'll talk about a whole bunch about like OGP being different and wanting to run as like a modern tech organization. Like, are we really very different? And I think the best way to kind of describe this is that like 95% of the time, we work with tools that are same as every other engineer working in a tech startup or working in big tech, right? We use things like AWS, we use like VS Code, we use GitHub, we use like MacBooks, as you can see. But then like the last 5% of the time is what I think what we spend dealing with like what I call like government stuff, right? And the government stuff here is actually not that bad. What I think the most I do in terms of like government stuff is actually working with agency partners to help them understand, how do you actually use technology, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Often the conversation is surrounded around like, okay, should we spend like X million of dollars to go build this like expensive bespoke system? And then our answer most of the time is not that like we will build it for you instead for like a lower number, is that like actually out there is a SaaS product that you can kind of just use off the shelf, and that will save you like X millions of like dollars that you can actually spend on taxpayer money that can actually save and like do much better stuff with. So yeah, really not much different in terms of like what we do at engineering at OGP. The next question is also like, okay, we talk about a bunch of autonomy, right? Like you can do whatever you want. How true is that at OGP? I thought rather than like answering your question straight, I want to kind of talk about how we build like health appointment system. So health appointment system started in like April 2022, which is like this year. It started not because like someone like higher up there wrote a paper and said that like we should build like a national health appointment system. It started because one of my product managers, Kenneth, actually talked to HPV and realized that, hey, actually like there's this pneumonia vaccine, pneumococcal vaccine, that if elderly above the age of 65 get, they drastically reduce like the death rate that we get from like getting pneumococcal diseases. And it turns out that very small percentage, like I think almost like just 2 or 3% of people that should be taking this are taking it. And we thought like, okay, we build like the COVID-19 vaccination system, why not give the same experience to pneumococcal vaccine, right? Make an easy call to action. So he made like a slide deck, and then he went to one of like the team sharing sessions, and he made a pitch to everyone, say, hey, join me like to build this system together. I have no idea what this looks like on the engineering side, but if you're an engineer and you want to solve this problem and you want to save, in his own words, like 1,000 lives by the end of the year, like join me with the system. And I think like a bunch of people just raise their hand and say, okay, I'm going to spend like my one like sticker time to go build the system. The way they work at OGP is that you have a major and minor product. The major product is what the organization thinks you should be spending your time doing. The minor product is sort of like a 20% time, 30% time thing. You can figure out what you want to spend your time doing that you think is impactful, whether for your own personal growth or you think it's like a adjacent like kind of product area that you think is useful. So we did that, and then like in June, we actually went out to individual GP doctors and told them, hey, do you guys want to onboard to this? Do you want to like onboard to this so they can get like vaccination during your silent hours and earn some extra money and also help save lives? And 570 people like onboarded onto this, and then we launched in August for pneumococcal, and then we launched again in November for like flu vaccination, right? So where's like the autonomy in this part of this? The autonomy in this part of this whole thing is that so my boss, like which is director of OGP, only knew that we were building this like somewhere like in August. Like, so he, I remember like I was there having coffee with him. Like we were having our regular one-on-one. I was telling him, hey, so you think I was like busy with, right? I was telling him, oh, by the way, like next week we're gonna launch this like new product. And it's like, oh, cool, right? And then I think that's like sort of symbolizes the level of autonomy that we actually have at OGP. So you find problems that are meaningful to solve, you build solutions, and then go out there to solve that, right? Like you don't have to ask for permission. If you think it's a meaningful problem, go build it, right? Validate your idea. The next part is about like, okay, so how do you even measure success for your product, right? A lot of times in like government or public sector, success is measured, I guess, like in very like vague terms, like how many people you help, how many lives you save. And if you compare this to like private sector, it's much more quantified in the private sector. And we take a similar approach here, right? So rather than like being hand wavy about like our product being successful, we actually, same as every other like private sector product, have dashboards that have like product metrics that tells you whether it's successful or not. Right? Example here is like on the health appointment system, we actually measure the number of like, the conversion rate for someone landing on the landing page and then eventually making a booking, right? We also measure like how many appointments are made, how many schedules are created. The only difference, I guess, between us and like a private sector company is that at the end of the conversion like funnel for like a profit-making company, it is like more money. But then for us, at the end of it is that you get someone that's vaccinated and potentially like life saves. But in the same means, like we are measuring quantifiably, like is our product successful? Like we're not being hand-wavy about it. So the other question that I often get at OGP or like even working in the government is that do you just work on simple problems, right? Like if you talk to people in big tech, they'll be like, oh, I'm building the next like planet scale like distributed database like system kind of thing, right? And that's what a lot of like engineers starting out in their career want to go to like FANG companies to build this kind of like systems. The answer to this is that I don't think we will ever reach the place where we'll build like a planet scale kind of like database system, right? Like we won't build like complex distributed systems. But I think the complexity that we have is actually not really at the technical side of stuff, but it's in terms of the business problems that we're trying to solve, like the business domain that we're trying to solve. And just as an example of this, so what you see here is actually like a diagram of like the vaccination logic and whether you're vaccinated and not vaccinated in Singapore. If you have been in Singapore for the last 2 years, I'm sure this is a big conundrum to you. It's equally a conundrum to me about like whether you're vaccinated after 3 shots of like Sinovac or like 2 shots of Sinovac plus Sinopharm. And this like exactly the complexity that happens, right? And I think it's also because like we are at this strange intersection of like public policy, people, as well as technology. That's why we have a lot of this complexity. And just for like, knowledge, like for this, actually we worked with MOH to simplify this by a lot because we told them, yes, like you put this in a computer, you can like churn 1 million permutations of like what the vaccination should be, but it's not humanly understandable. And which is why I think like they eventually simplify this. So yes, we have complex problems in like the problem domain that we're trying to make impact in. So question 6, right? What's different about engineering at OGP? What's different about engineering at OGP versus like engineering at like a startup, engineering at like a more traditional company? I'll say like the main difference is actually that we have end-to-end ownership of the problem. And what do I mean by this? So in many companies, engineers are seen as like, okay, we take some requirements from the product manager and then like we go implement this in code and like ship it out. But because our teams are so small and constrained, every single engineer like has a very big role to play on the product itself. And how this kind of like, a story that I can tell about this is that we are building a system for medical social workers. Actually, every single engineer that's on the team spent like 1 week shadowing like social workers just to figure out like what their job looks like. And we're doing this not just to kind of like tell them what a social worker does, but it's also to like help build user empathy about, is the system that we're building really helping people, right? Like how can we build a system better and how can we like make sure that it really helps people rather than it just being like a product that we are building to like fulfill some requirement that someone at MOH has. Yeah, so question 11, like what opportunities do I have to like learn and grow at OGP? Because I think one thing that we're really concerned about is to bring good people in and help them to kind of like become better, like if they do choose to leave in the future or just they find that they can actually learn and grow at OGP. The way to kind of like demonstrate this, I have just like put down from like working documents of like my reports on like core engineer level as well as like senior software engineer level. Kind of like what my core engineer did in the last 12 months is that he launched at least like more than 5 features in the last 6 months. He dealt with like production incidents. He's like has experience being sort of like a pseudo tech lead, which is like a feature captain that we call here on the product. So even as someone that's coming in at a very fresh grad level, like we have a whole range of exposure to building things and also like even leading projects. For my senior engineer, like he is focused a lot more in terms of like infra stuff. Like you want to build like infrastructure, you want to figure out how can we do like infrastructure and code and raise like practices at OGP. So he actually like planned and executed a database like downsized with 0 downtime and saved us like $20,000 every month on AWS. And he also like built standard and propagated like standard components on Pulumi, which is like an infrastructure as code tool, and like propagated this across like entire organization. So question 8, right? How do you measure performance? And I think this is like a very interesting question because like everyone that like asks, when you want to join the civil service, everyone's gonna tell you, oh, but are you joining as a like scholar or are you joining as like a average person? Because the outcomes tends to have a perception that's going to be different depending on you come as scholar, you come as a non-scholar, right? The way that we do performance at OGP, kind of like what Sarah mentioned just now, is that we have very well-defined career schemas to define like what does performance at every single one of this level look like. right? It's no longer about like, oh, do you have enough face time with like the director, or do you have enough face time with like the boss, or do you work on a very like high profile project, right? Like we know for certain and we define for certain, like, and it is publicly known to everyone, like what different levels of like being, say, a core engineer, senior engineer, or even a lead engineer looks like. And then we do 360 eval, and then all this information is processed by a manager, and the manager makes a call, and then it's a calibration. So I think like one big difference here in terms of how we do performance is that like it's a lot more quantified and well defined, and it's also like a lot more transparent to people in terms of like where you end up landing at. So question 9, right? What's next for engineering at OGP? I think we built like a whole bunch of like really good products. And I think the main thing we're going to do moving forward, and is why kind of like we're pushing for people to join us, is that while we think we only solve maybe like 5% or even like 1% of the problems that can be solved in the public sector, we want to build a lot more products. And the way they're going to build that is that we're going to start investing in tooling to help us like launch product a lot faster, right? Right now, like, you know, from an idea to like a product launch, it takes maybe like 1 or 2 weeks, or even like sometimes up to a month to get it going. If we can build tooling such as like this thing that we built, which is like create OGP app, like with one command, we spin up infra, we spin up code repository, and like we get things going for you, so that you can quickly put out a prototype and validate the idea rather than trying to like waste your time doing all the sort of plumbing that you would do on a regular application. So finally, last question, right? Question 10, right? So like, what is then your role in this whole journey? If you're coming in as an engineer, I think like there are 3 things you can kind of like help solve in the public sector. One is like obviously solve more public sector problems by building more public sector products. The other part is that if you're a very experienced engineer and you feel like you have something to contribute in terms of like raising the bar about like what we define as good at the government in terms of engineering, join us, help us define this bar and help us to raise this bar across the government. And the last point is that we want to build more tech teams in OGP and even outside of OGP. Because I think we don't have like a monopoly in terms of like good ideas and how to solve like problems. What we want to do is build a community in the public sector so that we have different satellite teams that are all working together to solve problems in different domains. Yeah, and that is all I have to share on engineering. I'm going to pass on time to Natalie.
I'm going to. Okay. Well, figure it out.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I'm a product designer here at OGP, and today I thought I'll share maybe some of my past work just to give everyone a little bit of a preview of the kind of like design problems and challenges that we try to tackle here. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm not sure if anyone actually remembers the COVID situation back in October last year. So when MOH released this set of healthcare protocols, I remember that a lot of people were like kind of like spam calling the MOH call center, trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do after I test COVID positive? What happens if I live with elderly? Do I have to move out? Do I have to go to a facility, etc., etc.? Essentially just like a lot of confusion, right? It was at this point in time that our team was kind of brought in to help, and our challenge was to find a way to make it easier for citizens to kind of figure out which healthcare protocol they were supposed to follow, essentially. So we came up with covid.gov.sg. Oh, okay, yeah. We came up with covid.gov.sg. So maybe I just want to ask like a quick raiser of hands. Who here has ever heard of covid.gov.sg or used it before? Anybody? Oh, okay. I see there's quite a few people in the room. Yeah, so for those who don't know, right, covid.gov.sg is basically a microsite just for the healthcare protocol information, right? So a quick timeline of what that week was like when we were given this brief. We were brought in on Monday evening and we were kind of like being briefed by SAF about the situation, and by Friday night we had already launched this website. So in that time period, right, we reached out to talk to citizens, we stopped the SG quarantine order Telegram group, we went for a visit to the MOH call center to see what they were doing there and what are the kind of questions they were being asked. And at the end of the week, we compiled all of our findings and research into this user-centric website that was by design meant to lead and guide users through the complex information more easily by just asking them to answer some simple questions about themselves, and then we will redirect you to the appropriate information. Yeah. So on that note, right, within the first 5 days, we actually hit 300,000 unique visitors, and we hit our first million within that month. Yeah. So I actually think this is a really, really good example of how good design can really change user experience. Because in that week, we didn't actually change any of the protocols. We didn't rewrite anything, right? We just changed the way that it was presented to citizens and how they interacted with that information. So that's really the power of design in this government context, right? Where we can actually reimagine the user journey and kind of like view people, and kind of like assist people who are in this situation, view it through their perspective, and then kind of like create a solution and a user journey that will kind of be more guiding rather than throwing it to them and asking them to figure it out by themselves. So these days I'm actually working on Isomer, which is a website builder for government officials. Yeah, so this is actually one of the tools that was used to build COVID.gov.sg. Yeah. So currently we're on a project to save millions of taxpayer money by migrating a bunch of government websites onto our platform, majority of which are school websites. So as of today, we've actually already saved about $500,000 in our endeavors. But I think the real design question here is that we see actually an opportunity to also reimagine what school websites could be like, what they should be like. I'm not sure whether there are any parents in the room, and if you've recently experienced or recently tried to go through like a posting for your child, you know the majority of school websites are not great, right? So this was a really big opportunity that we couldn't let go of. So we actually ran also we actually ran a co-creation workshop with schools to kind of like ideate together on then what the future could be like. Yeah, so these are just some examples of the problems or the design challenges that we work on here at OGP. And actually the rest of my design team is working on all sorts of problems, all in all different spaces, and they're trying to tackle them through design, right? So we've got people who are working on the SCAM vertical, in the healthcare space, and even the finance space as well. So maybe this is just a brief overview of what design is like at OGP, right? So firstly, design is actually a really precious resource in our team because most projects only have 1 to 2 designers working on them, and some don't even have a designer at all. And because of this, we get a lot of ownership on our products because our teams are purposefully kept really, really small so that we can move really fast and stay agile. So this gives a lot of the designers the opportunity to kind of like decide what you need to do next, what you want to do next, what you should do next, and plan your own roadmap and set your own tasks as well. Yeah. So in the projects I mentioned previously, design also has a really big stake and voice in crafting those solutions. We don't just like push pixels or focus only on one part of the design sort of process, but we're actually end-to-end designers. Yeah, but we're actually end-to-end. We solve problems from end to end. So we start from like problem definition to research to like user testing to handoff and maintenance as well. Yeah. So like I said, right, we're as big a voice as the other functions on the team, and we actually also want to get them involved in our work. So we see design as a team sport, not just a single runner race. Yeah. So yeah. So not only do we bring the voice or like the perspective of the user to our team, but we also kind of like drag our team along with us so that they can see for themselves, right, what users are going through, how do they respond to like our screens or our user tests, and share that knowledge and like empathy with each other as well. Yeah. But then sometimes also, right, we have a lot of freedom in that sense, I guess. We have the freedom to kind of like explore what we want to solve, how we want to solve them, but also freedom and affordance to have the space to fail, learn, and try again, right? So I think sometimes, we have to pivot like certain features that we worked on for like a couple of months. So here's one example for like go.gov.sg, where we kind of pivoted our feature from like a public-facing Go search feature into more of like an internal directory. Yeah. But the team like understands that, that's just something that we learned from. We tried it out, it didn't work out, well, that's fine. Let's move on and we learn together, all together. Yeah. So I guess also because of that, we kind of are allowed to be a little bit more experimental in our work. So I think specifically when we talk about how we want to do research, right? For example, right, our Scam Shield team actually sent a bunch of scam SMSs to a group of citizens to test out our user flow. We also had our we also had our Homer team. Oh, I'm supposed to here. Oh. We also had our Homer team who went to the SHN, the stay home notice facilities to actually go and like catch the users there because they were being quarantined there, right? So they couldn't leave. So instead, our team went there to go and visit them in all of their full outfits to kind of like troubleshoot some of the app issues that they were facing. Yeah, and then also recently, like I mentioned, our isomer co-creation workshop. So we actually, with the outcome of that workshop, right, with the ideas generated together with the schools, we kind of put it up in like an art style gallery so that other people in OGP can also take a look at some of the things that we've come up with. Yeah, so I think also while designers may be working maybe alone sometimes in their products, we're not left unsupported. So the design team actually gathers every week for what we call Design Sesh, where we learn, play, and just talk with one another to keep each other in the loop, right? So it's actually a really, really great support system where we can get open critique and feedback from each other as well. So even though we're not working on the same team, all the designers are still really open to us, like asking for each other for help and for advice as well. Yeah. So something that I just wanted to mention that I feel like I'm quite for lack of a better word, privileged for as a designer here at OGP is that I'm not just designing for a faceless user. The people that I'm designing for very concretely are my family, they're my friends, right? They are my neighbors, or people like you as well. And I get to see the impact of my work in like the day-to-day context, in the people around me, in the services that they use, in the marketing collaterals that maybe I see on my CC wall. So knowing that I have an impact on my community, for me, is something that makes me really proud of my work here as well. Yeah, and then thank you. And I think that's why we're looking for more designers to join us. So design needs a seat at the same table as all the other functions, right? And by starting with good design, we can improve things right from the start and ensure that we keep a smooth user experience for all citizens in Singapore as they use our products in all sorts of situations, right? So right now we have more problems and we have people to help solve them. So do join us to help us do better by design. And maybe I'll see you in the Whiteboard Club. Thank you.
I like design, sorry, my font and all that is a bit more black and white. Yeah, so my name is Leonard. Hi everyone. I head the product function of the team. I've been on the team for quite a while. A bit too long, but it's like five or 6 years, I think. Well, I started off as a software engineer, and when I joined, worked on quite a few of the products such as FormSG. I know, like I think somebody introduced that, so I think that was something I started like way back, along with like 4 or 5 other products. So started coding, but also then kind of became, I guess, the first PM back then, because we realized that we were starting projects and all that, and someone had to go out and talk to users as well. Couldn't just write code in a room. So started talking to users and eventually built teams around some of these products, and which is also the story of like quite a lot of our PMs over here. I always like to describe it as we're trying to be an incubator where there are a lot of internal startups, and I see PMs as entrepreneurs for public good. Coming up with an idea to solve a particular problem and actually going out there to do it. So I'm just gonna just say 5 reasons really quickly, and it's actually going to be I think a summary of a lot of stuff that my colleagues said of why you could consider to be a PM on the team. The first are the problems. The problems that we tackle, in my view, are very impactful. So if you join us, you will be able to play a huge role in fighting scams. You will be able to play a significant role in addressing our aging population, and you'll also be able to imagine the future of money through central digital bank currency. They were also working on, and was at FinTech for, the FinTech Festival for as well recently too. Next, it's about our products, our solutions, most of which are quite widely used these days, used by millions of people on a monthly active basis, and many of which were just created by a small team of 5 people in a matter of weeks. Third, it's about our strategy as well. And the way we've crafted our product strategy is to be flexible and responsive to different needs. And how we're doing that is through platforms and verticals. So a core part of our team are centered around platforms, where these reusable tools can be Lego blocks that do well in a particular domain. We have an identity provider, we have HID for that, we have data, we have forms, we have websites, we have messaging. You can imagine you can combine together to build end-to-end systems yourself. So if you're an agency and let's say you're administering a new grant, you need a grant application system, imagine that you can actually drag and drop these different components together in order to build that with little code. So that's a big part of our strategy to platforms. And we also have 3 verticals that we customize lightly on top of our platforms, to go deeper in those spaces. And these right now are SCAM, health, and finance. And moving forward, we plan to actually grow both teams, right? We plan to grow like different platforms. Workflow, for example, is still quite new, and I think we can build a few things over there, and potentially even new verticals, and really for these existing verticals to go deeper as well. For example, for SCAM, I think we're still beginning. There's still a lot of work to do, to like fight this so-called scam, and it's a huge cat and mouse game. We need all the minds in the room, to see how we can go up against them. And also, it's about the culture. Over here, there's one way to describe it. It's really about autonomy, and my colleagues have mentioned a lot about that. In fact, we take it to a huge extent that the whole month of January, which is coming up, we actually give people time off their product to just work on anything you want. So it's one whole month of just build something new. And many of our products, about I think half of them, were started from like recent hackathons, like from the past 2 years. And lastly, most importantly, it's about the people. Right, so I just put people's faces here. I'm not sure if they're best angles, but it's fine. So I guess the question, I'll say that like our people come from like different diverse backgrounds. There are people from the public sector, there are people from startups, there are people from like FAANG companies that have joined us, and they're all among such people. I think what's common about all of them is that they have that entrepreneurial spirit and a heart for public good. So if you're someone like that in the crowd, I encourage you, come talk to us. So a few of our like PMs are decided as well, come talk to me as well. And yeah, let's see if we could solve these technical problems together. Thank you. And I'm not sure who I'm supposed to hand the mic over to. So you.
Excellent. All right, thanks so much. So I'm Sam, and I'm part of the product operations team. And maybe just a bit of sharing. And this is the team, and when we led up in India, where we went on a trip together. Yeah, and this was minus 6 degrees. I think why I want to show this photo is that it's really about, I guess, like overcoming uncertainty, overcoming even adversity, coming together as a team. And there's certain themes that we've all been hearing just now, but we working together as one team, as a product team together, and not in silos, is something that fortunately is quite not as common in government, and that's something we want to bring forth, we want to propose. So yes, so what do we do in product operations? So I think it's the three things. Firstly, we're user-centric. We want to bring the voice of the user back into the room. So instead of product support just being like, okay, I just want to handle the user queries, we want to pen them off, and then that's it. It's not the case anymore. We want to bring this feedback back into the product to inform product features, inform product direction, inform the product roadmap. Also, we want to amplify the impact, and this means like stuff like propagation, which can be quite strange, right? Like for me as a government saying, okay, I want to propagate my products, but that's the angle that we want to go at. We don't just want to direct people that, hey, use our products, and then we'll just force download all our apps onto your phone. That's not the case. We want to have the buy-in, have the trust in our products. That's the main thing, trust that we want to endure in the public, in the minds of the officers as well. And lastly, of course, efficiency driven. As the name goes, for product operations, we really want to then solve the issue of like, hey, how can we make our own processes more efficient, and also going forward, how do we make other government agencies, the processes even more efficient as well? And that's where we have a seat at the table. Yeah, so some of the stuff that we've done. So yeah, so firstly, I think it's very there's I think a bread and butter is really translating these metrics to insights. All this information we've done, we've stored it, we can translate back into product road mapping, product insights, and also solve, I guess, like big issues within government, even the small effort and impact that we have. So because as a government, we have that reach to a wider group. So any impact that you do as an individual person, you can feel it move forward across like a much wider group of people. Secondly, of course, is kind of propagate our ideas and products as well. So again, it's an idea about enduring trust from the agencies, trust in the public, trust that the government knows what it's doing, it's producing great stuff, great tech, and not that this is just government apps are just going to be like that. It's going to be it's all going to be this way, and we all just sigh and then yes, okay, it's our fate that this is what it is. It shouldn't be the case. which we want to then propagate both our ideas, our practices that we want to change the status quo, so that it's not that government will just always be a static and this monolith, but can be responsive and agile. And so, yeah, I think it's really something that we'll all be talking about. We really have the autonomy that net change. So I came from another part of government, and I will confidently say that the most junior in my team has more autonomy than what I had previously. So this is the case of that really, if there's something that they propose and I did propose, let's discuss it, and then let's see how we can connect you to the best team, and then move stuff to the best way forward. So it's never the case that, oh, you need to talk to me, then I need to talk to my director, and the director talk to another director, and so on and so forth. So in fact, a lot of times when we interface other parts of government, they're quite surprised, because usually it's the case that, my director will talk to your director, then after we'll form a link. But in that case, we just call the ops thing directly, hey, what's the problem? What's the issue? Can we resolve it together? Yeah. Let me know in those words. Yep. So yes, I think that's really short to say about what we do. And yeah, and if you're interested in working on these solutions, working on these issues, yeah, I think there's no better place to work at than at OGP, and no better place to, I think, create impactful stuff, work with great people, amazing people, and also work on great products together and to propagate our ideas forward. So yeah, thank you. And thank you.
Hi all, I'm back. Now we're going to spend probably maybe 10 minutes going through some of the questions in the pigeonhole. So again, feel free to scan if you haven't already. The passcode is Tech for Public Good. Yeah, give you all a few seconds to scan. Actually, I'm going to invite my colleague Russell to answer this question. Hi, Russell. The first question is, what is the difference between GovTech and OGP?
I'm not one of the speakers, in case you didn't realize. But I'm head of people in open government products. So it's a very good question. It's one of the top questions we normally get anyway. Sorry, I know everyone virtually. So what's the difference between GovTech and OGP? Right, so formally and legally, OGP is part of the legal entity of GovTech, but for all practical intents and purposes, OGP runs a separate organization. Which begs the question why, and I'm going to explain why and what OGP is here to do. So we're all here to do the same mission. We're here to build tech for public good. That's what GovTech does, that's what OGP does, that's what different tech organizations in government do as well. Why OGP was formed, and Sarah touched on this, I think, earlier as well, was really to say, look, you know, as you look at how tech is done internationally, globally, look at how good tech companies build tech, there are ways this is done, tech practices, tech organization practices. There must be a way to do this, even when we talk about public service and public good. It's hard to change things overnight, and so actually senior management in government looked at it and said, look, we want to create a space where we allow these practices to take root, so we can see whether that works, and when it works, how we can scale that to fundamentally transform how the rest of government delivers public good in Singapore, and how we scale that even beyond Singapore. Right? So that fundamentally is different. We are pursuing the same mission, but OGP fundamentally was set up to do things, try things, do things differently, and scale what works. Which is why practically everything we heard from all the sharings about how we run things with autonomy, why we report directly to senior management, was expressly for this purpose. Hope that answers.
Okay, can you stay here? We have another question for you. Is there a cool-off period for failed applications? I do really want to work at OGP and have an upcoming interview, but I'm not really sure whether I'm technically ready.
Thanks for the question. Firstly, I have confidence, don't worry, just go for the interview, man. But also, I know it's one of our voter questions as well, so many people are wondering this. Our general cool-off period is 6 months. The reason why we do 6 months is really to give enough time for people to kind of grow, develop, get more experience, right? It isn't so much just an arbitrary line, there's a 6-month rule on it. Meaning that if people come to us and they're shy of 6 months or whatever, and they show, look, I've actually got significant changes and experience on my CV, we are able to look at that, right? But hopefully you understand the principle underlying why we do 6 months, which is we're looking to see what market change, what would change has there been in your experiences so that we can interview you on very content basically, right? So 6 months.
Okay, next question is also for Russell. Sorry, last. Are the current job openings all that OGP is looking to hire for this cycle, or will there be more openings released soon?
So at the first bound, OGP is looking to hire at least 50 people in the next 2 quarters, right? But we don't intend to stop there. OGP wants to continue to grow because we continue to see the vision and do to deliver public good, right? So So firstly, specifically, how many job openings do we have? There's more than 50. Look at the website, you don't see 50 listings. It's also a function of how we list our roles, which is also tied into how culturally we run the organization. So if you go there now, you're going to see something like, there's a single role that says core senior software engineer. And that is not saying we're only hiring one person for that role. That is an evergreen job posting to say, look, we're hiring full stack software engineers to work across multiple projects. Right? Like we're hiring somewhere in the realm of like 20 to 30 engineers, right? At least in this first round. Right. So the reason we keep that evergreen, it comes a lot to what a lot of people have said, which is we do allocate people to work on projects, but we do maintain the ability to deploy people based on interest, needs, and also what skills to work on different things. Right. Which is why you see less roles than 50 on the site, but trust me, we're hiring quite a bit now.
Do you want to answer the software engineer question too? How many new software engineers are you looking to hire by Q1 2023?
So Q1 2023, Q1 to roughly in Q2, we are looking to hire about 30 to 35 engineers. This is going to be a mix. I know there's another question there about what levels we're hiring at. So a lot of these are going to come at individual contributor levels. So these are like senior engineer folks, people maybe just shy of senior at core level. That's maybe rough numbers, 20 to 25. We are trying to hire a good batch of experienced people, engineering managers, lead engineers, and above, right? Because we are trying to start up new teams as well, right? So we're trying to bring an experience profile. But long story short, we're hiring across basically all seniorities, roughly 30 to 35.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Nat, can I invite Nat back up? We have a question about how do you encourage those, for example, career change that may not have a portfolio to show?
All right, this is awesome. Actually, in our team, there are a couple of people who are career changers. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them, and I don't see them around, but I will answer on their behalf. So for those who are maybe trying to come into the design space, what we see from a lot of our applicants is that they might go for like an external course. Maybe they go for like a Google UX course, or they might go for general assembly is really, really popular. But actually what I would recommend is more of like, we still want to be able to see how you approach a problem and how you would tackle it or redesign it. So out in the world, there are so many problems out there, right? We get people who come to us with portfolios and they say, oh, I found this website or maybe this application that I use on a daily basis, and I don't think that's a good website, or I don't think this is good design. So they work on that change and they try to user test it in their own bounds, maybe with their friends and their family, and then they show us, oh, with that research and with that testing, we found that, hey, I created this redesign, and that's what they show us in their portfolio. And these projects like that are perfectly fine to show us. We think those are great because it shows that you have initiatives that you want to try something out. You're not waiting for like something to happen. You're going out and you're finding your own opportunities and your own things to change. And that's something that we really, really look out for. It's something that we value deeply. Yeah, so I would say just go out there into your world, in your everyday life. If you see something that you think is not good and you think could be better, try to do it yourself in your own capacity, whatever capacity that is. And then put it together in a portfolio and show it to us. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we have more questions. Sorry. So we have a few actually for design. So at what level are you hiring designers? And how many new product designers are you looking to hire?
Russell can back me up on this. I will also say, right
Welcome
now
back to the stage.
Do you want to say it? Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
If you want me to back
I think right now we are trying to look for more lead and managerial level designers. For the same reason that like what Russell mentioned, we're trying to set up new teams, right? And actually right now in our team, we only have one design manager who is taking care of like 10 of us, and he is a little bit stressed. So we kind of need to help him out a little bit. Yeah.
The intent there is to basically double the design team. We're hiring roughly 10 designers. The priority, as Nat has said, is to start at the senior base, but also to then therefore create capacity for us to hire across all the levels. And this will be within like the first half of next year.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to call back Kiwei. We have a question about what traits are important to be a good PM designer engineer, or what traits do you guys look out for?
Yeah,
so for engineers?
I guess I can answer for engineers, but I think and also for the other roles, I think generally, I think two things. Obviously, like the first level is to have the ability to do like the work in your specific profession. So this means as like an engineer, you should have like necessary technical skills to write code and like build products. As a designer, you must understand design fundamentals. You should be able to carry out UX research and like build products. Design product as a designer, and then as PM, you must just be an entrepreneurial like mindset for public good. Beyond your abilities, I think the two things that we look for that might be slightly different from like other places. One is initiative. I think like as you can see from all the different sharing, I think like autonomy is like repeated at least like 10 times. And I think it's real. Like, so you'll be like coming here, and I think like a lot of times you have to kind of take your own initiative to figure out like what's the impact that you want to make. So this is like definitely not a place where you can like sit around and wait for someone to tell you how to go about like making impact. So I think that that's one thing that you look for that's probably different from like other places like initiative. And the other thing is value, right? So first and foremost, we are like an organization that's building tech for public good. And this means that like you shouldn't look at your role here as like, okay, please stop to join here and like build just cool tech, right? End of the day, I think we are spending taxpayers' money to actually build these products and pay your salary. Like you should be committed to actually like build things for public good, right? You must believe in the mission that technology can be used to kind of like improve lives for Singaporeans. You must like, you know, like in Hong's word, often it's like to have the bleeding heart to know like what you want to do and what the problems you want to solve in society. And I think like on both of this point, initiative and value, like if you really are strong in both of this and you feel that like maybe I'm just starting out, I'm not super strong as an engineer, I'm not super strong as a designer, we do take that into consideration in terms of like considering you for a role at like OGP.
QA, while you're up here, can you answer what's the interview process like for a software engineer?
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick rundown of like interview for like core and senior roles. And then the lead one is like around the same also. Maybe like the things I'm testing for is different. So for core and senior, there's first like just a screen. So we send you like an online test, get it done. I think the main role here is to get a sense like, you know, can you write code, right? Are you able to understand code? You pass the screen. We have 2 technical interview rounds. Both of these rounds are structured roughly the same. Their resume deep dive to understand, you know, your past experiences, like a chance for you to showcase your portfolio of work that you've done. And then a coding question, right? I think often like people ask, okay, are you gonna like how much time do I have to spend on lead code to like, you know, build my understanding of like solving algorithmic puzzles? I think we don't actually feel like algorithmic like puzzles to solve as the technical interview part of the question. We actually focus more in terms of like, can you actually write code? Can you reason about code? Can you kind of like modify your code and talk about your code, right? This means that we have different parts to our questions. You solve it, you talk to your interviewer, explain the solution that you have. So this will be for like 2 rounds. If you pass that, then the final round is just a round with like the hiring manager. Like the hiring manager role is really to figure out like, are you a good cultural fit? And then the focus is a lot more on the 2 things I talked about just now, like your ability to, your values in terms of like public good and your initiative on like getting problem solved. Yeah, so that's like broadly the process for software engineers coming to OGP.
Okay, one last question for you, QA. Can we choose what sector we'd like to be in when we apply to OGP?
Yeah, so obviously, like if you want to join healthcare, I think like excellent, like to join healthcare.
Do you work in healthcare?
No, but apart from it being one of the more impactful, I think like I mentioned just now, people come in with like major and minor product. So the major product is kind of like connected to you based on what organization needs are. So sometimes this could be like in an area that maybe you're not like 100% like interested in, or you want to work on different things. I think that's where the minor product comes in. On the minor product, you get to choose like where you want to spend like maybe 1/3 of your time on. So for instance, like maybe your main product is healthcare and you don't really like to work in healthcare, like, you know, problems, and you want to work on say like fintech problems, right? Like, or payment problems, or like voucher problems, and you can like 1/3 your time on like redeem or to do the CDC voucher like redemption. So that's kind of how we manage like allocations. But more importantly, for people coming into OGP, what always happens is that we give a choice to the person that's coming to OGP, like there are different like openings on different teams. We will like set up chats with you as a like candidate coming in, as well as like the potential manager in that particular team, and then like have a chat, decide like this is a good place for you, does it align with your learning goals, and then you can make a decision about like, is this where I want to like kind of start up my journey at OGP. So I think the fundamental of this is that we believe that to bring really good people, and to get like really good people to do really good work is to like put them in the area that like they're interested in, like rather than trying to force them into like particular places that they might not be as interested. Yeah.
Thanks, Hue. So I think maybe I'll answer 2 more questions. So one, do you only look at hiring top GPA local uni grads or open to all? Russell, you want?
The short answer is we're open to all. I mean, at the end of the day, GPA, what we don't do is, it's not as if we take all the CVs, look at GPA count and say, show these away. We don't do that. We look at it and say, look, what's the demonstrated capability this person's shown? And even for students, that can be, you know, the kind of projects they've worked on, etc. Right? So, open to all.
Thanks, Russell. I don't know if I remember my GPA. Okay, Sam, last question. What are the roles performed by product ops?
Thanks, Russell. And maybe just one point about the last question is we don't just hire uni graduates. We have people in our organization without a degree. So it's really about demonstrated ability and what you bring to the table. So for product ops, maybe I can describe it as product operations. It takes the strategy of the product and runs with it. So we really scale the idea of the product itself. So we have four areas. Firstly is the idea of the user support, supporting the product, supporting the users, and also then bringing back the insights from the product itself into back to the team, checking with the designers, engineers, PMs, and then sharing the feedback from that. So maybe one example of that is that we had a major, I think, incident on the product itself, and this was not seen by the engineers because the dashboard looked great. The product was running fine, was running perfectly well, but in the wrong way, and that was picked up by our side, and then we managed to solve it really, really fast. So without that feedback loop, we won't be able to detect it until much later. And again, we go back to the idea of impact and stuff that we I think touched on. There was a product in the healthcare space that actually impacted a lot of users, and we didn't catch it fast, and there were issues. On the other hand, we also could find issues related to public policy. So if because a lot of product interface with public policy as well, or an extension of public policy, together the feedback is also to allow the policy itself to be changed. So we don't just take the policy itself and then suddenly to maybe digital products. We want the feedback to go back into the policy teams to say, hey, actually the policy is not great, can we tweak it? And if you just say it, then you say, okay, where's the data? Then yes, and then come up with the data. So we are bringing that. Another big part of it is also propagation, and that's where we work with the partnerships team, we work in marketing, and we go out to teams. So when we work marketing or partnerships, and they get buy-in from the director, the CE, the chief executive, but we work with the operations team themselves, and then we need to convince them, we need to change their workflow. And for those that are working with, I think change management, that change management is hard. People don't want to change. People just want to do the same thing over and over again. And that's where we are in there to actually say that, hey, we're here for you. We're here to work with you. We're here to actually be with you step by step. And not just, okay, this is not just one big scary thing that we're going to throw onto you, then you're going to leave and then take all the credit. No, we're going to journey with you through this process. At the same time, it's also the idea of, again, also the gain of operational efficiency. Do you just want to digitalize workflow, just the workflow itself, and then just change it to digital form? I think that's not great. What we want to do is then we go into the space, go into the teams. Once you build that trust, and again, it's the idea of trust, right? We want to continue to build trust. Once you build that trust, then we go to the team that, hey, let's look at workflows, let's work together on something, and then you're more willing to then work with us. And then overall, that's where we're coming into a tech problem. So I think maybe my last comment, sorry, so long, that if you look at the problem in the circle, all the teams itself actually tackle the problem in different ways. So we don't tackle it as one team united, but we tackle it in our different ways. Design tackles it in the user journey aspect. Engineering, of course, with pre-products, we need to tackle the issue. Product managers with the strategy. And on site, what we do ops management, ops change, ops development, and also doing propagation of the product. And instead of just showing fancy slides, we show a product. Okay, this is the product, it works, it's great. You want to use it? That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And thank you all. So I think for our online folks, I think that's the end of today's session. For the people online, people in person, we can mingle. There's lots of food here, but I just want to say thank you everybody online. Hope you had a nice evening. Hope you took food. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but feel free to reach out again. You can apply to us at go.gov.sg/OGP-roles, or you can join some of our other information sessions coming up. Thanks everyone online.